Look how clean my desk is. I know it's silly, but I'm really proud of the fact that I've been able to keep this new desk pretty clean. There's not a whole lot of stuff here to distract me, but there's one big problem. I don't have a place to charge my phone. I do have some options. I could buy another nice looking charger that sits on the desk, but it's just another thing, and I'm trying not to have things on the desk. So I could embed an inductive charger in the desk so you can't actually see it, but I'm not gonna do that because I have another idea. So my first idea was to have a little charging tray, something that would slide out from underneath the desk, you put your phone on it, and it charges. And then I thought it would be cooler if that actually came out from underneath the monitor. And then I remembered that some people actually use their iPhones as a continuity camera, and that's when the idea clicked. So here's the current idea, and I know full well that this is gonna take several attempts to get right. I wanna make a mount that goes on the backside of the monitor, but it can swing out to hold the camera with a magnetic charger. It can sit like this so that you can see the screen, or if you need to use the camera, it will fold up again so that the camera is facing out, but still on a magnetic charger. Now there's a lot of stuff to figure out there. First of all, how all those joints are gonna work. But even once I figure out the joints, how do you get all those joints to stay in place with the camera in all those different positions without having to tighten and loosen things? I have no idea, but we're gonna figure it out, and it starts with this. This is an inexpensive MagSafe charger that I got on Amazon. I'll link it down below if you wanna check it out. I'm sure Android has something similar to this, but I have an iPhone. Basically, there's a magnet built into the phone, and you can charge it by sticking it to another charger that's MagSafe compatible, and it's strong enough to hold it, but easy enough to come apart. So the first step is to take some simple measurements of this with some calipers and then build this little disc in Fusion so that we have something to start building around. And then we gotta figure out those joints. This video is sponsored by Mando, which is a high performance whole body deodorant. So you can put it in your pits or on your feet or anywhere else. Mando was created by a doctor, and it's clinically proven to control your odors better than just showering with soap alone. In fact, it's made to last 72 hours. So if you don't get to shower for a little bit, you'll be good. I stay pretty active with work and with exercise, and I was actually looking for a new deodorant, something that didn't have aluminum in it, and these don't, but mainly something that wouldn't stain my clothes. That's why I tried this for the first time, and it doesn't. You can't even see it, but it still works for several days. Anyway, I've been using this for a while, and then I got Mando to sponsor the video, and they sent me the spray, which I've never used before, but check this out. You can't see it at all. And honestly, I like the way this stuff works better than the stick. Also, personally, I'm not a big fan of things that smell really strong, so I was actually looking for the unscented version that they do have, but turns out I like the Mount Fuji. And then when they sent me this bourbon leather, I like it a lot too. But unlike traditional deodorants, they don't use their fragrance to mask your stink. They actually use something called mandelic acid to stop the odor before it starts. So it's kind of like pre-deodorant. On top of all that, this stuff is skin safe. It doesn't have any baking soda in it. It's cruelty-free and vegan. It's pH optimized so you can put it anywhere on your skin. And it just works. So the best way to try Mando out is to get their starter pack bundle. It comes with a full-size stick, and then you get to choose whether you want the spray or the deodorant cream, and then 2 free products like the deodorant wipes and the mini body wash. Plus, you get free US shipping, which is pretty great. So here's what you do. Hit the link down in the description, and then when you're checking out, use the code ILTMS. That's gonna give you an extra $5 off, so it ends up being, I think, 40% off the total value. It's good stuff. Try it all out. I think you'll like it. Big thanks to Mando for sponsoring this video. Okay, this just got way more complicated, but in kind of a cool way. I'm gonna have to show you what I'm thinking at the whiteboard. So in my mind, I'm kind of shifting gears here. I thought the whole like charger phone holder thing was the interesting part, but I think these hinges are actually the interesting part. What I'm trying to make is a hinge that is tight enough to hold multiple pieces in multiple positions, but also loose enough that you can actually just grab it and put it where you want it. I've used springs, I've used cables, I've tried to do this in a lot of different ways. And I'm starting to think through a way that I can do it just with 3D printing. Now, of course, this is all in my head. I haven't even drawn this yet, so I have no idea if this is gonna work. But the whole idea is to use flexible material like TPU to build a little compressible spacer in between 2 pieces that need to rotate past each other. So if you were to have a barrel of a hinge, and then in that barrel, it had some kind of like teeth so that they would kind of lock into place, they need to be able to spread away from each other so that they can move away, turn, and then lock into those grooves again. So if you put a compressible spacer somewhere in here, as you start to turn these things, this section can squish down on that flexible part and then squish back when it has space. but I have to figure out how to model that. And like, I don't even know how to do that part. I mean, if you think about it, that thing is kind of like a pie crust. Like it has wavy lines that come out from the center of this circle. So they kind of come out like this, but they're flat, but they're also three-dimensional and they have to be on two pieces. I gotta start there because I have no idea how to do that. That took a really long time to figure out, but I did figure it out, and the trick is using the loft tool. I'm currently in the middle of reshooting our entire Fusion for Makers course, updating it for 2025 and making it current with how Fusion is right now, and this is a tip I'm absolutely gonna be adding, because this doesn't seem like a difficult shape to make, but it actually took me a long time to just figure out how to do it. So the whole idea is that it's a wedge, it's a triangle, but it comes from a center point and goes up, but then it also goes out and it has a curve on the back side, and I just could not figure out how to draw it. Well, it turns out you just draw it flat and then do a sketch that's up as the outside point, and then you loft between that bottom sketch and that point. It's pretty simple really, but it just was really difficult for me to figure out how to get to that point. But now that I've got that shape, I can make 4 of them, and essentially I have those locking kind of pie crust pieces, or at least the beginnings of it. It took a surprisingly long time to figure out how to model that little shape, but eventually I got there, which led to some test prints. I printed out a couple of static pieces, and I did it all in different colors so I could kind of see what was happening. The orange parts are the flexible material, and I was thinking here that if I had a little bit of a flexible piece, these outside pieces would be able to kind of squish in to fit them into the other part of the hinge. Well, that wasn't actually right, because I ended up breaking the other part of the hinge, and I also figured out that my little teeth were way too big. So instead of just adding those little flexible spacers, I did another version where the entire end of each part of the hinge was flexible, and this was the key. I also reprinted the outside of the hinge solid so that it would not break as easily, and these two pieces fit together super well. Now, I also made a hole that went through the entire thing that will eventually have some sort of a rod to keep them aligned. I don't have that yet, and so instead I used a couple of small screwdrivers. And with those screwdrivers, I got a working hinge, and it actually works really well. It snaps in between the locations and stays there. And I'm pretty sure that if I have pins in here holding these things together, these hinges are gonna be strong enough to keep the phone where I want it. So I think I'm on the right track. I also wanted to validate that you actually need the flexible stuff in the print. So I reprinted this entire side solid with no flexible in it just to see if these two parts would fit together. And they actually didn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I really wanted to, I could force these two pieces together and they would fit, but it might break one of them, and there's gonna be so much friction in there that moving them is gonna grind those teeth down eventually, and then it won't work. So I think having one part of the hinge with some flexible built into it is definitely the way to go, and that's what I'm gonna keep moving forward. But now I have to move on to designing the rest of the stuff around the hinges. So thinking through this design, I have at least 4 pieces I have to figure out. One, I've got to mount it to the back of the monitor, so there's some sort of a mount. And then there's an arm that will come up to hold the rest of it, and it needs to be able to move to get the whole thing out of the way. Then I have a third piece that's gonna reach over the monitor, whether it's coming over the top or coming up from underneath the bottom. And then a fourth piece, which actually holds the phone, and it will be able to flip up from below or down from above. I'm wondering if possibly hanging over the top and coming up from under the bottom are 2 separate projects, but we're gonna keep going as if they're one. Let's give it a shot. My first version of all of the pieces printed worked. For the most part. They actually worked fine, they printed fine, but they don't look great, and that has to do with print orientation. If you're new to 3D printing and you don't know what print orientation means, let me briefly explain. You can print any object in multiple orientations, and you choose one based on several different factors. For example, if you wanted to 3D print this arm, and you knew that there was going to be a lot of force pushing down on that end of it, you can print it in multiple ways, some of which are stronger than others. And that's because when you 3D print something, you're building up layers on top of each other. Unfortunately, the connection between those layers is kind of weak. So you would not want to print this where the lines went like this, because each one of those lines is a potential place for this thing to break. Instead, you would want to print them in this orientation. And on top of that, you can't typically just print in midair. You have to print onto something. So you have to build a temporary support structure underneath the thing that you're actually printing. And that's what caused me a problem. Now, printing multiple materials together is awesome and it works, but having these materials together forced me to change the orientation of the print, which means I had to have extra support material. And that caused the problem. So even though we can print these two materials together, we don't have to. In fact, I think I can probably make some sort of a connection point where you can stick them together after the fact and they'll still hold their position. And on top of that, printing them separately is actually way faster. So printing these things separately was absolutely the way to do it. These pieces look great, and I used a different kind of support material that snaps away, and so all the surfaces look fantastic. I also printed all of the flexible parts with their own support material, and that's gonna be easy to pull away. So once I get these cleaned up, we can try sticking them together. Well, I thought that was gonna work, but they don't quite fit. Even though it's the same geometry, either printed together or printed separately, nothing else has changed, but there's, I guess, enough of a little gap in between the pieces that they actually are too big to fit together. And even though I crammed them together, they're so tight that it won't lock between the teeth like it's supposed to. So I think I'm gonna have to change the spacers just a little bit. I had to print several different versions of these little flexible pieces to find the right size, but eventually I got it so that I could stick these things together pretty easily, and listen to this. It snaps in between the locations. It's perfect. And also, these came in. These are stainless steel dowels, or pins, but I got these the same length as this hinge because they need to run through and hold all these pieces together so that as you're twisting them, they don't kind of pull themselves apart. Now, adjusting those flexible pieces to be able to get this thing to fit together and snap is awesome. It solved a problem, but it also might have created a problem. And what I mean by that is that all of these joints are holding themselves in place. That's awesome, but there's also no weight on it. This thing becomes a long lever once you start putting weight on the outside, and each one of these joints is gonna have a little bit of spring to it, which means this thing's gonna start to droop. Now, the way around that would be to make these tighter, but that was the reason I couldn't get it together in the first place. And I'm honestly not sure what to do about that yet. You can actually see the slop in these joints. That little black area that's in between the orange and the gray, that is empty space that has to be there so that these two pieces can move away from each other. But this amount of slop only has to be there because this peak has to be able to move past that peak. And so what we could do is actually make the peaks smaller, but make more of them, which is gonna push those two surfaces closer together, less slop, but more surface area touching. I just have to reprint everything. Like, I literally have to reprint every single piece after I adjust the model and after I figure out how much I need to add in clearance between these pieces to fit together in the way that I want them to. Rather than showing you all of that stuff again, we're gonna talk about the last two things I need to add to this to get it working. First off is our charger. Now, when I printed this thing out, I left a little slot here for the cable to come out because I don't really have any other cable management planned. Not exactly sure how this is gonna work, but this thing should fit right in here. Bing pot. So that's a perfect fit. It sits just a little bit proud and it should hold the phone just like that. Now, the other end of this is also something we have to figure out. I made the back of this a little bit bigger because it needs to attach to the back of the monitor, and I wanted as much surface area as possible because, again, this thing's a big lever. So all the weight out here is gonna try to pull this away from the back of the monitor. So this needs to stick really well. And hopefully one of these will work. These are both pieces of double-sided tape that are kind of made for mounting heavy things. This one's 30 pounds, this one's 38 pounds. So I'm gonna try them both and see which one works better. But basically, because it's double-sided tape, you just put the tape on the back of the thing, peel off the other side, and then you press it for a little while against the surface, and it activates some sort of special adhesive that gets stronger over time. At least that's what they say. We'll give it a shot when we get there. Actually, I just looked at the back of this package and it says the object depth should not exceed 3/4 of an inch. And that is definitely longer than 3/4 of an inch. So at least this one probably won't work. I was just about to stick this thing on the back of the monitor and call this finished, and then something dawned on me. If you wanted to have one of these at the bottom of your monitor, like I do, but you also wanted to have one of these at the top of your monitor so you could fold it over and hang your camera up there, why make two of them when you could make just one and a little slot for this thing to fit into? Back to Fusion really quickly. So sometimes you have an idea and you think it's gonna work and you go really far down a road surrounded by trees and you get tunnel vision and then you find yourself at a dead end and you realize the idea is not gonna work. And that's where I'm at. The problem is that hinges seem simple, but they're actually kind of complex, and especially once you start introducing leverage. And I just did not account for the amount of weight and slop together that's going into this. And honestly, I don't think it's gonna work, like at all. Each one of these joints has a lot of slop in it. And that's okay, except once you add the weight here, that compounds all the way back to the main joint. It just won't hold itself up. There's just too much give in that top one. Well, it turns out that this kind of ratcheting hinge or whatever would be perfect in this orientation, because the weight is not working against the hinge. It's still a lever, but you don't have to worry about it changing the position of the hinge as much. So if I wanted to, I could strengthen up the arms a little bit because there is a little bit of deflection, and then mount it right here, and you could put your phone on the side of your monitor. But that's not what I'm trying to do. So I've designed one more hinge idea that's on the printer now. I want to try it out. Basically, instead of having the two surfaces that kind of rub against each other and you hope that there's enough friction there to hold them, we're going to use the castle nut idea, where you have these pieces that engage together and lock them in the position. They're going to be held together with the tension of a spring, which you can compress to separate them, change their position, and then the spring will push them back together, theoretically. Here's where we're at, and I think this is gonna work. We've got three pieces now, basically the same start and end, but I changed the middle of it, so now there's only one section in the middle instead of two, but all these pieces lock together with these little teeth. Then, in this empty section, there will be a spring that allows you to push these things away from each other, change their position, and then the spring will help push them back. The entire thing will have a rod that runs through it to keep it all aligned. Let's put it together and find out if it works. Sometimes when I get excited about something on camera, I worry that it comes off as like not real, but trust me, I am legitimately excited by the fact that this works. Look at this. So you just push these pieces apart, turn them, and then they seat themselves back together, and it's locked, and it's awesome, and it works on both of them. I mean, that's really cool. Anyway, I'm gonna go put this on the back of the monitor, but it's gonna be hard for you to see because it's on the back of the monitor. So this is what's gonna happen. This face right here is gonna be attached with that VHB tape to the back of the monitor. It's gonna be held in place. To move this thing in and out of the way, all you do is grab this, slide it over just a little bit, and then swing it up. And then it's out of the way. And then when you wanna put it back, you slide it over and swing it down, and it seats itself. That's so cool! Obviously, this video ended up not just being about the dock thing, it's really about problem solving and trying to stick with it. Sometimes the first solution just doesn't work, obviously, and I was really close to letting this entire thing go and just calling it a fail. But coming up with another idea in the last moment, it actually worked out. And even if it's not perfect, it's a new path that I can follow. So if anything, I hope it's just some encouragement for you. Don't give up, just try something different. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll catch you on the next one. And that actually gave me the good idea. The good idea? I also reprinted? But that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay. the slop in between the gray and the orange, and a charger or a mount. It goes that way.